I went from a small-time editor to working for Spielberg, and then my career completely changed. So my moral of the story is, if somebody asks for help, always be there, always be willing, right?
Benedict, it's like a pleasure for me to finally meet you because your history, your career in movie trailers in Hollywood is super inspiring for me. I work in movie trailers as well. I just like to start with something. Like every time I say to people I work in movie trailers, they all say to me the same thing. They say, "Oh, I don't watch trailers anymore because I always feel that I've seen the whole story." What do you think that is?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say this because I hear the same thing too. Of, you know, people who are not in the industry goes, "Oh, you give everything away," and you know the way it happens, unfortunately, is movie advertising these days is really ruled by testing, and everything we cut, everything we do for the studios goes out to testing, and testing decides. You know, there's different quadrants, young men, young women, older women, and they try to hit all the numbers to get the best response they can from all these people. As a result, there's a scene in there that tests better, so they say put it in there. There's another scene in there that tests better, they put it in there. And you end up putting a lot of stuff that originally you wouldn't have put in. A lot of filmmakers who I work with prefer teasers who are more mysterious and don't give that much away. Unfortunately, the industry is now a business, and there's so much at stake every weekend. The studios have maybe a weekend or two to crush numbers, and so they put, you know, whatever great scene is, they put it in the trailer.
It reminds me of the trailer that came out recently for Gladiator, the second one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the trailer is almost like 3 minutes long, and you really feel after that oh wow, basically it's like a summary of the whole thing. But I guess it's because movies nowadays, especially this kind of movie like blockbusters, are so expensive, but you don't want to be taking a risk by not showing too much, and you want to make sure that people are going to be like, oh, this is really amazing, I want to see that.
Right. And you know, unfortunately, they get carried away. You know, from my perspective, the shorter the better. You know, get me excited, get me intrigued, and get out. But unfortunately, as you said, there's so much at stake that you know they feel that most people at the studio feel that they need to show the goods, and sometimes we just end up showing too much.
I like this analogy of going on a date. Like you're going to a date, and the person in front of you is like saying, "Oh, I'm really funny, and I'm also courageous, and I work in this type of business, and I'm making that much money." It really feels like you're overselling yourself, and it's not really attractive to be like this. So if you're teasing a little bit about what kind of thing are you doing, and you being a bit more mysterious, I think in the end it brings much more attention, but it's a bit more risky for a film. I think it's a different way of seeing things.
Oh yeah, they want to know more, so they probably go on a second date with you.
So first of all, like your story is so interesting because I was reading your biography on LinkedIn earlier, and you started in Paris as a musician with a famous singer called Renaud. How do you go from working with Renaud in the music business in Paris to working in trailers in Hollywood?
Well, I grew up in Paris, and I went to the Lycée Montaigne, and Renaud and I were together in high school at the Lycée Montaigne. And Renaud was a bit different, always a bit different from everybody, and he was writing poems. And I had started playing music. I already had a band when I was in high school, and we played at the different high schools. And I said to Renaud, listen, you know, nobody's going to come and listen to poems, but if you put them in songs, they'll be more interested. So I actually helped them learn some guitar. And after school, we would go to the local cafes. There was the son of the cafe we went to played the accordion. So there were three of us, and we would go and play in cafes and pass the hat and make a little extra money after school. We eventually, a few years went by. He ended up working in a bookstore, Boulevard Saint-Michel. I ended up working for Otis Elevators. We had kind of gone our ways. But we were still, after work, getting together and playing in front of people. And we did, Coluche was playing at the Théâtre de la Ville, at the Châtelet. And we were playing for the people sitting in line. And there was a guy called Lederman, I think was his name, who was a famous manager, and said, "Oh, you kids are great. Come and see me next week at my office." And we ended up, he had started a place called the Café Conce on the Champs-Élysées, un café-concert, where people had dinner while watching the show. And we were the opening act for Coluche. And that same summer, I met a guy who had just signed with a rock and roll band in California. And he said, you should come join me in California. And that was very tempting because ever since I was a kid, I was always looking at the United States. I said, I don't know why. There was a store close to La Place Saint-Sulpice called Western House, and I would go there and I would buy cowboy boots and I would buy cowboy shirts. And so I decided to quit my job and go to California. And Renaud that summer recorded Les Bétons and became a huge star. And I came to California. I played with a rock and roll band that I joined. And as it happens in most rock and roll bands, they don't last very long. But I had a musical career for about a year and realized that I was not going to be able to make a living playing music. I can't read or write music. I couldn't do studio work. So I was determined not to go back to France. I had made the journey to the States. I was determined to stay in the States. So I ended up being a delivery boy in a liquor store and, just a little crappy little job. And I heard of a job. Somebody told me, hey, they're interviewing for a messaging job at a trailer company called Kaleidoscope. You should go check it out. I've never been a big movie goer. I was not a big movie growing up. And I had no idea what trailers were. I absolutely no clue. But the moment I walked in that building, and the room was at the very end of the hallway. And I walked by rooms that were open on each side and I could hear the sounds. And somehow I could feel the energy. And it was kind of a moment where I realized, oh my God, seems really interesting. And I got the job. And the job at first was getting sandwiches and delivering boxes. And I befriended an old union editor who started showing me how to do things. And slowly but surely, I worked my way up in the company. Being frustrated, not having, I always thought I'd be a musician for the rest of my life. So I was like, oh my God. When I started doing trailers, I was able to use my musical knowledge and my love of music in the trailers I started cutting. So my trailers were very musical. And I also kind of broke the mold at the time where I started cutting trailers in the late 70s. They were still using movie scores from previous movies because they could license from the same studio. And I started cutting to rock and roll songs, which was like crazy. So that's how I went from musician to trailer editor.
Wow. And so you collaborated over the years with the Beatles, U2, Prince, Rolling Stones, and you have a music background yourself, and you love music and you love to use them in the trailers. why do you think that is that a lot of people who are working in trailers nowadays come from usually the music business? It is like a sense of rhythm. You have like a good ear to have the rhythm of things and make in a short time something really impactful.
Trailers, even if they're just dialogue driven, and it's just I've done some trailers that are just have a sustained drone and just dialogue that amps up, are completely music driven. There's a rhythm to it where, even if you start slow and ramp up, it's the first thing I look for is music. Music will usually kind of guide me which direction I'm going. So as I make my selects, the first thing I look is for music. I think everything in life is rhythmic. It starts with your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is rhythmic. And I remember when I cut the Top Gun trailer, at the time we used to cut on film, and we used to, when the trailer was in the theaters, we used to go to the theater and show our card to the woman at the front and say, we just want to watch the trailer. And I remember sitting in the back of the theater watching the heads bopping. I said, okay, I've got them right exactly. I remember my client asked me to make a change on the Top Gun trailer, like move a scene. And I said, well, it'll take a little while because I got to readjust because it's all cut to music. And most people don't really kind of realize that it's really everything's cut to music. But if you move it a little bit off, it's completely off. And once you're taken, I think it's the same thing. If you're on a dance floor and the music skips, you're like, oh, and then you got to regain your step. It's the same thing with trailer. We take you on this rhythmic ride, and you kind of go along with it, and that's how you really get absorbed into the story. So rhythm is extremely important.
So you come from music and you have this good ear for musicality in the trailer, but you had to learn a bit more about storytelling and using this music to tell a story in a few minutes and using visuals and shots and dialogues. And when you're approaching a cut for a trailer, I know, for example, we have a friend in common, Sonia, which is based in France. I love working with Sonia. We've worked together for like 5 years now, 6 years. And we have the same process when it comes to trailers. Like we always start with the music bed first, and then we find the narrative for the right piece of musicality. And I've seen other agencies doing the opposite, which is to start with a narrative and then trying to make the music bed match the narrative. How do you approach? I guess you would make the music bed first as well.
That's the first thing I look for. The first thing I put in my system is the music, and it's funny because we now work. The industry has changed so much that now we regularly work with, especially at Rebel, with my company now, with about 4 or 5 composers who a lot of time, like we're on a big movie. We just got a big movie from Warner Brothers, and every individual editor has a different taste. So we usually deliver 2 or 3 trailers per movie, and each one of us will really pick a different tone. And we usually sometimes find a piece of music and have the composer redo it by adding strings and drums and enhance it. Trailerize it. This is the first thing, in my group especially, we all start with music. That's the first thing. And the music weaves the story. The music takes you left when it drops and it stops and there's a sting, and the music basically dictates the way you're telling your story. Other people do it with dialogue. I find it difficult to adapt music because, as we talked before, there's a rhythm. And the rhythm of your editing and your dialogue fits with the music you have, and the music kind of drives you. But people have different ways of doing it. I remember when I was cutting on film, there was a guy where I was working who was literally cutting all his scenes on a synchronizer, or on the bench on a synchronizer, just on his desk, just like moving things. And I said, you're not even running them. You're just rolling them. How do you know? So different people have different processes. My group, me especially, it's all about music. It's all I look for first before anything. And a lot of times, the composer will send us, choices, and I find one, I go, oh my God, this is so good. I got to cut with this. This is brilliant. So it's all about music with me.
If you want to create emotion in a trailer, it's like when you have a feature and you tell a story in a couple of hours, you have time to create empathy for the characters. But when it comes to like telling a story in 2 minutes and create emotion in 2 minutes, the best way to do it is music. So that's why I like to think that music is first, like you, because musicality is going to bring the most emotion in your trailer, and it's like a shortcut to the emotion, I think.
When when there's a note there's something going and it stops as a piano note or something, and you know what shot or what dialogue is going to go there. It's like, okay, that's the moment where, I've got a little time and emotion, and then it ramps up again. So yeah, it's all about music.
And you said earlier that every editor has their own taste, and we work in so many different movies. You worked for like big films like Top Gun, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Batman. Are you trying to reflect the director's vision into the trailer, or do you have space for having your own vision as well, your own taste?
The beautiful thing is, and it happens to all the editors, when you become successful and you have a few big trailers under your belt, filmmakers come to you for what you do. So you still have to honor the director's vision for the movie he made. You can't just do something completely different. It has to reflect, it was the saying, I think it's Spielberg had said to me, I've been working on this movie for 7 years. It's like my baby, right? I just had a baby. It's my newborn baby, and I hand it over to you to show the world my beautiful baby. So I trust you. So you have to follow their vision and honor their vision and what the story of the movie is. The beautiful thing about doing trailers is that you create your own piece. Filmmakers don't know how to cut trailers because they're stuck to the linear story that they tell in a movie. I had an argument with Tom Cruise about, I think, on Mission Impossible 3, where I took the last shot of the movie and it was the opening shot of the trailer. He said, you can't do that. I said, people haven't seen the movie. They don't know it's the last shot. It doesn't matter. So we're able to, what I love about our business is that our own, and more now, our pieces are really little masterpieces of their own, and their own little story, and they're told differently from how the movie is told. So fortunately, when you have a bit of I just had this experience with this new director on Top Gun, on the new Top Gun trailer that I cut. He was a first-time director, and he was I did a few things where he wasn't sure, and I said, listen, trust me, I've done this for a while. This is how it works. I worked with Spielberg for 40 years. He lets me do my thing. A lot of filmmakers who I work with now say, I can't wait to see what you do with my movie. So they do, a lot of filmmakers hand you the reins and let you do what you're good at. And a lot of us are good in, different styles, different genres. I've been pretty fortunate that I'm, because I worked in a small company, and they were only, at the time when I started, they were like only 5 companies in the whole country where you had to learn how to do everything. So we had to do comedy and drama and action. We would not just kind of pigeonhole into one genre, which unfortunately a lot of the editors are now.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's because as well, like the directors are really protective. Like you said, it's their baby. They spent years making it, but they don't have this fresh eye anymore. They kept, writing again and writing again the film through the script, through the shots they made, the dialogues and the editing. And now they don't have the fresh eye anymore. I need someone to be able to see the movie for what it is and then mix it up and change things. And I guess it's continuity of, as a director, you have to trust your team. So you're not going to do everything on set. So you have to trust your team for what they do. So I guess it's really interesting to be able to do your own thing on trailers, even though they belong to like big for you, like the biggest filmmakers in history.
Yeah, it's a very different format where, and even now, even more now, because now we're in the YouTube world and the streaming world and people on their phones, where uh, you have to keep people's attention quickly, and you have to keep them there. So the short format of getting people's interest is very different from a long format of people going either watching on at home on the streaming platform or in a theater. They're there, and they're going to watch your story. Um, Jerry Bruckheimer, when I started working with him at one point, this was when I think it was before YouTube existed, so trailers were only in movie theaters. And he said to me, basically just imagine you have a family of five, right? And they sat down, they got their seats, and the guy is walking up to get the popcorn and a drink. And he's walking up the aisle, so he's looking away from the screen, and your trailer comes on, and you've got to do something. It's a sound effect. It's an opening of a great song to just catch his attention, make him look back, and then keep him there. And so your first 15 seconds of your trailer are crucial because if you hook him, he's going to sit and watch it. And then he might say, hey, it's pretty good. I'll go and see this movie. So the attention span of people now is shorter and shorter and shorter. Our job is to basically, in a very short amount of time, show people how great this movie is. So it's very, very different. It's a completely different format from filmmaking. And fortunately, when I started in the business and we would go to studios and we would go to the editing room of the movie we're working on, they were like, the trailer guys, yeah, they're here. Give them this. Now they're like, come in. What do you need? We'll give you anything. You want dailies, we'll give you. Because they realize that the trailer can make or break a movie. If there's a really good trailer, people talk about it. And if they talk about the trailer, they talk about the movie.
Actually, it reminds me of a rule called the pick and rule, where people remember an experience based on what they see at the very beginning and what they experience at the very end. So that's why in trailers you have, like, for example, bumpers. The first few seconds do like a fast montage to hook people, like you said, and then at the end a big climax until the title treatment. So it's like becoming more and more difficult to tell stories in a short time. Like you have to do, especially in Europe now. I think in the US you have like more time to do trailers, like 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30. In Europe it's like some 2:30. In Europe it's like Sonia and I were doing is like 1:30 sometimes. They want something less than 1 minute 30. So it's really complicated to hook people and tell the story in like a very short time frame.
For me, it's been really interesting because when we first started cutting trailers, I look at some of my old trailers. They're like 3 minutes, 3:20. They were long trailers, and some of them were fine. They didn't feel long, but they were much longer. I have now had to learn how to do trailer 90, 60, 30, 15, 10, 8, and 6. And it's absolutely fascinating to see how you can actually tell a story in 6 seconds, but you can't, and it's a new format. So it's very exciting.
And so we talked about the importance of music. We talked about the importance of doing something really interesting at the beginning and at the end of the trailer. Do you have any other advice for people who are getting started in this industry, or even like other storytellers who are not working in trailers, but they could use one of your strategies in trailers to make their stories better, basically?
Well, listen, I just had a couple of young kids intern with us this summer in Los Angeles, and as you know, I'm a lot on LinkedIn because I post my stories and I kind of look around. I just kind of look at everybody's work, and there's an incredible work out there. And Usually a lot of the trailer companies are proud, so they post their stuff for everybody to see, and I go, oh my God, that's really good. So I discovered one guy who now works for us, who was posting his stuff on LinkedIn or YouTube. And then he introduced me to a couple of other guys. One is a high school student in Denmark who just interned with us for a month, who's brilliant, who would just cut stuff that just blew me away. And there's another one from the East Coast who's 16 and in high school and is just editing incredible stuff. So my recommendation, and I say this to everybody, I just did mentorship with a company called Film to Future for 2 weeks. And this incredible young artists, like in their teens, doing incredible stuff. It's my advice is do your thing. Be yourself. All the people who work with us at Rebel, everybody has a voice on how to cut a trailer or cut a spot, and I'm interested in hearing every voice. One might not be the right thing, but I'd love to see what the idea is. So it's just, and I see this in editing with a lot of people. At first, when they start editing, they're kind of editing for their boss and then for the client. They're trying to, I hope, maybe I'll put this because she's going to like this. And the same thing with the client. And after you get a couple of wins and a couple of finishes, you start to just trust your own instincts that I'm putting this, I like this, I'm going to put it there. And so you create your own identity, your own style. I mean, Sonia, when she came and worked with us in Los Angeles, blew everybody away because she had a completely different style of her own. So that what I recommend is, there's tons of great editors. Don't just copy what everybody else is doing. If you have a style of your own and everybody's got their own style, pursue that, embrace it.
And do you think it's important for an editor to be able to cut on different genres? Because I know for some people, cutting horror movies is like another job in itself. It's really different from cutting a comedy or cutting a drama. Do you think people should specialize more into one kind of movie, or on the other hand, they should be able to do different genres and be versatile?
Well, if they can, it's great to do all. I like doing all of them. I like the different formats because one of the great things about trailer cutting is the variety. Every movie is a different adventure. Every movie is a different experience. It's a different piece of music. It's a different piece of storytelling. So you go from a comedy to a drama to an action piece. It doesn't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. That said, some people are just better at certain genres. Some people they're great action cutters. And there's a few of them who used to work for me at Trailer Park. They said, you know what, that's what you're great at. We're going to keep you doing this. And some of them don't mind. Some of them say, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I mean, there's one guy who used to work for us at Trailer Park called Bill Neal. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's the king of horror, and he is, that's his thing. And he loves doing it. He actually likes doing other stuff when he gets given the opportunity, but that's his thing. So I think for people, if they're comfortable with a couple of genres, they're fine sticking to that. If you can do more, great. Then you become more valuable. And it's like putting the card in your hand when you negotiate for salaries and you try to find a job in another company. The more you can do, the more valuable you are.
Mm-hmm. I say that because usually I hear people saying you should specialize more and more because people are going to pay you more for being able to specialize and be the best in one kind of specialty. But I guess in trailers, even you can't do if I would have any job as a freelancer, if I was doing only comedy or only action, you have to be able to be versatile enough to, and I think become a better storyteller if you do other genres because you understand more storytelling in different aspects of it. Like for you, when you started in this industry at Kaleidoscope Films, I'm sure you had a lot of different movies available for you.
Yeah, we didn't have choices. It was because there were only 4 companies. Whatever came in, if you were available, you would do it. And I like the variety. I like going from National Lampoon's Vacation to Witness to Beverly Hills Cop to Ferris Bueller. It was like everything was a different piece. I love the variety, but like Bill Neal, he's great at one thing. He is so much in demand in that particular genre. So it worked for certain people. I personally like to do everything.
Mm-hmm. And how was it because when I started in this industry, I wanted to become a movie trailer editor when I was, I think, 20 or something like that. I was in the US for 1 year doing like another bachelor degree in the US. Mm-hmm. And I ordered from the foundation of Andrew Keane, his documentary about movie trailers, the history of movie trailers. And I was amazed by it. And I remember the Night of the Iguana trailer, it was amazing. And you had this guy as a mentor. You were in his company, Kaleidoscope Films. Like, how was it for you to be trained and have this mentor in this industry?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable because he was brilliant at it. And he was also, because he was so good, he had worked at a studio. He had worked at MGM and decided to do a trailer company. So he had already been doing it at the studios for quite some time. He was an incredibly talented person. I remember, so at the time when we were cutting trailers, we used, most of the time, we used scores from the same studio so that the music could be licensed. So scores of previous movies from the same studios. And downstairs, there was a sound room with movie scores on 1/4-inch tape. And you'd go and you'd sit at a 1/4-inch machine and you'd go and there was a list of all the different cues and you'd listen and try to find what you were looking for. And usually the scores had like 4 boxes of 1/4-inch tape. And then when you found what you liked, the sound guy would transfer it to 35 millimeter mag and you'd cut it on your moviola. So I remember I try to remember what movie I was working on. And I was kind of stuck with the music. I was like, I didn't know where to go with the music. And Andy said, look at The Serpent and the Rainbow, box 3, cut 5, about a minute in, and listen to that. I think that's the right piece. So I go downstairs, I put the thing on the machine, I go down to that cue, and it's perfect. I go, holy moly, this guy was so good. But he was also very inspirational. He was incredibly talented. I was stuck a few times. When I would get stuck on a trailer, I'd call him down and say, I don't know where to go there. I was cutting an officer and a gentleman, and the same thing. I had done my opening, was working great, but I was kind of struggling with the transition. And I was a new editor, so I was not really seasoned yet. And he came up with 5 pieces of copy, and that was it. And that was the solve. I have, kind of made the effort myself to become that person with now this young generation, with these kids that we just mentored for a month, and be that person, pass the baton with the experience and knowledge that I have.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoy the episode so far. I'm just going to take a few seconds of your time to talk to you about something very important, and especially if you are a movie trailer editor or you aspire to be one. Over the last 6 months, I've created a community platform designed to connect movie trailers editors in the industry. Whether you are in Paris, London, LA, New York, or wherever in the world, this community is all about connecting to each other and learn together and grow together. The first part is going to be about the community features, which is chat spaces, live events, masterclasses, anything to learn and grow together. And the second part is going to be the courses. And for that, for young editors who are just getting started, I'm going to create 2 courses. The first one is going to be about storytelling, because I think before cutting anything, you need to understand the basic principles of storytelling. The second course is going to be about all my step-by-step process to cut a movie trailer. I'm going to show you how I work on a specific movie, and I'm going to show you all my techniques and all my process to cut a trailer for my clients. And the third part of the community is going to be one-on-one coaching for people who want to get deeper and learn faster the process of cutting trailers. If any of this sounds great to you, just send me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. Well, that's it for now. And now let's go back to Benedict. And you worked with another legend that we have to talk about a little bit, Don LaFontaine, the voice.
Don, now, could you help this gentleman out and read the side effects to him, please?
Certainly. In a world of erectile dysfunction, if you have an erection that lasts for more than 4 hours, see a doctor. Or call Bambi at 555-0169.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Don. Don LaFontaine.
When I started at Kaleidoscope in the late 70s, Don LaFontaine was there, and he was cutting radio spots on quarter-inch tape with a razor blade, literally cutting the tape and splicing them together. And then he moved on to, he eventually ended up at Paramount where he was, when he started doing the voiceover. And Don basically became, there were 3 or 4 guys that were incredible. But Don became the voice of trailers. He could do no wrong. This guy would come in, whatever script you gave him, it was horror, comedy, drama, he nailed it. And him and I became very good friends. We spent many times together. Yeah, he was incredible. He was unbelievable.
Do you miss voiceover work in trailers? Like, I know you did like the trailer for Beverly Hills Cop, like the latest one, and you used some of Dan LaFontaine voice in it. Do you miss this kind of trailer making?
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because so when I was asked by Netflix to cut the new Beverly Hills Cop trailer, they said, could you use Don LaFontaine's voice from the trailer you did in the Beverly Hills Cop 2? And I said, well, that's an interesting idea. And we AI'd it first from YouTube, and then we actually I reached out to my friends at Paramount, and they found the original mag that we digitized. I was very good friends with Don, as I told you, so I actually talked to his widow. I called her and asked her for permission, and she was very excited. And it was kind of surreal 40 years later, because the first trailer I cut was in 1984, to be cutting a trailer on the same movie 40 years later with Don's voice. And it worked great. And it was actually, I really liked the format. And then I saw online, because I like looking at people's reaction to the work that I do. And, as I told you before, I used to go to theaters to watch it. Now there's audience reaction videos where you can see how people react to the trailers you cut. So I looked at a lot of the reactions, and a lot of people said, wow, I really miss this way of doing trailers. We should do more of this. So I'm actually talking to a few studios about doing more of that. Because there's, it's interesting. There's a certain power of transition with a voice and words that cards don't have. And, it's like, he's almost kind of holding your hand and guiding you through the story. And then he met this girl, and that a card just doesn't do as effectively. And some of these guys like Don, and there was a guy called Hal Douglas, there was a guy called Percy Rodriguez, and of course the guy before Don was a guy called Michael McIntyre, who were brilliant, who brought, I think it was just another element to the package of the trailer. Now you have great music, great story, and great graphics and sound design. There was also great voiceover and incredible copy, that verbally said felt more powerful. So I hope that we do more of them. I'm actually pushing on a couple of things that I have right now to say, why don't we try it and see how people respond. So we'll see with testing.
Oh yeah, I guess you could, because with AI now, with this software called 11 Labs, we use a lot of this software in Zilot in the UK with one of our other clients, because before we use like a mic in the studio and record ourselves like a temp video, and now we can do anything with 11 Labs with AI. Do you think we could do like an AI version of Don LaFontaine or like any other famous VS artist and just bring back this old school editing?
Yeah, possibly. You have obviously, there's a lot of legal matters to but if you get the permission from the family or you could. It would be interesting. We got incredible response from a lot of people who, loved hearing his voice and loved the idea.
Speaking of the Beverly Hills Cop trailer that you did recently, I noticed something that's quite unusual nowadays for action movies. There's no music drop, as if you were keeping the whole track, maybe cutting a few pieces here and there, but never a single music drop on a joke or action scene. It's like your kind of style, personal style, to do this kind of trailer?
Well, this is how we used to do it in the 80s. And funny you should bring this up because the director, when I sent him the first cuts, brought up, maybe we should drop the music there. And I said, well, you're asking me to do a flashback trailers like we did in the 80s. We did not do drops to accentuate a dialogue. We just went balls out, beginning to end, nonstop. And again, to what we were talking about earlier, I find that once I'm in with the music and I'm jiving and it's moving along and it's a song that I know, I don't want to be stopped. We didn't need to stop the music to make the dialogue work. Because we didn't do it at the time, we figured out, and this is before stems, where you have to work around lyrics and find a dialogue line that fit between two pieces of like the woman singing. But we figured out how to put our important pieces of dialogue within a comp track. I like it better personally. I'm not crazy about music stops. I look at a lot of trailers, at big bombastic trailers like The Rock and Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop and Jurassic Park. There's no music stops. It's just balls out music beginning to end. And for me, it keeps that energy. Even when I look at stuff where somebody lowers the music dramatically to hear a dialogue, and I said, don't lower it. Let's just raise the dialogue. I remember I did a lot of trails for Tony Scott. The first trail I did for him was Top Gun, and we became really good friends. And I did pretty much every one of his movies. And we were mixing the trailer for Days of Thunder, the race where Tom Cruise was racing the cars. And we were at the final mix, and Tony Scott kept saying, louder, 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 louder. There was no let's dip the sound. It's just because I think once, again, we talked about the music earlier, once you kind of thrown into the piece and you're jiving to the music and you're in that rhythm, I find it just disruptive to stop the rhythm. Let me enjoy the song beginning to end. It's like listening to a song. If I listen to the song and it stops, what happened? I'm just getting to the break where I know the refrain that it goes into and it stops. So I had learned earlier in my editing career to do it that way. So even now in trails, I'm cutting a big trailer right now, I'm not doing music stops. It's my style.
Mm-hmm. And because sometimes there's like so many different tracks in the same trailer. I like when you keep like one music from beginning to end as well. And what about sound effects? Because I think before we had like less sound effects in trailers, like mostly music and dialogues. What do you think about it? Like I know for example, in France, like personally, I use maybe 5 or 10 tracks of sound effects, but really, I'm really light in sound effects, but I know people who are doing like 40 tracks just for sound effects. What's your approach on that?
I've taken, I remember one of my editors was like sick and I was like going to make the revisions for him. And I looked, I opened his projects and I looked at the timeline. It was like, oh my God, what is this? They were like 50 tracks. Again, the way I started cutting, I started learning cutting, we were cutting on film. And I have a moviola that still runs, it's my office downtown. There were 3 sound heads. So basically you didn't have the luxury of having a computer with 50 tracks available. So the way I learned was I had to basically 3 tracks to work with. So I can only put so many sound effects. But I also learned to cut to music, and a trailer that's really well cut to music does not need sound effects. So Beverly Hills Cop that I just cut, there's no sound effects. I mean, there's a couple of things, just ambiance and a crash or whatever is there. But that said, I've seen some incredible pieces that are all sound design, and that where the sound effects are basically the whole piece. They're the part of the story. They're the way it's designed. Bill Neal, who cuts these horror trailers, got a lot of tracks, and usually he has a gimmick that he uses that's kind of the thread throughout the trailer. But he doesn't really necessarily use 50 tracks. So I like it. I mean, I like hearing it. I respect it. A lot of stuff that I cut is funny because I cut pretty much on all the campaigns that we have. And when I hand over my spot to the finishing department, they look at it and goes, "You have 4 tracks." I said, "Yeah, that's all I need."
That's amazing. Less is more sometimes. You don't need too much tracks. It's just
you got a great piece of music and you're telling your story well. There's no need for, and most of the time anyway, I've gone to mixes where, when you arrive there and they show you the first pass, it's like all the sound effects are way high and it's like, it's killing the rhythm of the music. Let's lower all the sound effects and raise the music. So, you've built 30 tracks of sound effects and you're not using them.
And what about, I think you did also the trailer for Godzilla Day One. Mm-hmm. It was a bit more heavy in sound effects, no? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. It's interesting because, we did the trailer for the Japanese clients. So they were we had to kind of follow certain guidelines that they wanted. And they wanted more sound effects.
Do you feel like a difference in terms of culture? Because I know, for example, I was learning color with Company 3 in London when I was learning how to cut trailers in London. Mm-hmm. And they saw cultural differences between, if I were doing a color for a client in Japan, for example, their idea of blue would be different versus the blue in London. Do you see things like this in trailers, cultural things that make trailers different from Japan or the US?
Yeah, I do. I think, and every job's different, but there's cultural differences. I mean, even in Europe. It's funny because I look at a lot of the stuff that Sonia puts out, especially the French comedies. They're a thing of their own, that would not fit the American mold.
I love this cut she did for, Climax by Gaspar Noé. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing cut as well. And same, music from beginning to end, the same. She's super talented. I'm super happy to work with her. She's great. And you work with so many legendary filmmakers, like we said, Spielberg, Baz Luhrmann, Guillermo del Toro, Tony Scott, Ridley Scott, Michael Bay, Robert Zemeckis, Oliver Stone, Tom Cruise. Who was the most inspiring to you? Which one, when you meet that person, you were like, wow, they changed my approach of filmmaking, of telling stories?
Well, they all were in their own way. Spielberg probably was the most influential one because I actually went to work for Steven in his apartment for a year on E.T. I was hired to cut the behind-the-scenes documentary, and then I did a lot of the trailers and the promotion for E.T. But I spent a year with him one-on-one in his apartment. I mean, he would go and he was filming Poltergeist, but he would come in and out. So there was something very interesting with Spielberg that I learned. It became really important in my career that I used every time after that. There were 2 things. He would tell me, don't repeat a sequence. So if I've seen a sequence, don't go back to any of the shots from that sequence because you're showing me stuff I've already seen. So I've learned to never use the same sequence in a trailer, right? And maybe one shot and an end montage. And the other thing was with him, because he is such a great filmmaker, I had to get the conviction of my edit. He would say, I don't really like this thing there. And I would say, well, it's there because of this and that. I had to explain to him why I had made that choice and sell him on it. So it taught me how to work with directors, how to make my own point, how to sell my personal idea. That they might have not thought maybe that shot belonged there, but once I explained to them why I put it there, they said, "Oh, okay, I get it." Tony Scott was this just brilliant visual filmmaker who was so much fun. So he just kind of instilled the fun of movie making and the fun of trailers. And we had a great relationship. He loved the stuff that I did. Jerry Bruckheimer was extremely important in my career because I think my first job with him, it might have been Top Gun or Flashdance before that, but then I pretty much did all their movies with Jerry and Don Simpson. They were brilliant filmmakers. And, if you look at their movies, the soundtracks for every movie is a great soundtrack. So they spent a lot of money. So they respected the idea of using good music. Tom Cruise is a whole different bird because Tom Cruise is Mr. Inspirational. He looks you right in the eyes. Nice to see you. Same thing. I developed a great relationship. He asked for me on all his movies. He would come into my office. We'd spend hours together. So his passion rubbed off on me. I kind of got the joy and the excitement, and this is great, and he's pumped up. Paul McCartney is another one because when I was a little kid, I used to listen to the Beatles, and when I eventually got to work with Paul, it's interesting. I had the same thing with Prince. There's something, when I first met Paul, the very first job I did, which was in 1995, I think, for the Beatles anthology, I went to London and I sat with Paul, and they needed a trailer for this 8-hour television show that he had done about themselves. And the guy had come to LA and he had kind of gone to the different trail companies and got reels from editors. And I guess my reel was picked. So I go with Paul and I sit down with him, and he looks at me and he says, I've seen your work. It's really good stuff. And I said to him, well, I've been listening to music. It's not bad either. And so instantly we became friends, right? What was interesting, and I have this also with filmmakers and the bands that I've worked with, from U2 and Prince and Stones and the Beatles. There's something really interesting that happens when people meet and they have mutual artistic respect. I respect them for what they do, and they respect me for what I do, because they don't know how to do what I do. I certainly don't know how to do what they do, but there's a level of interest and respect for how good I am at my craft. And so that creates that bond, where they come to you because, again, we said, they hand you, even if it's an album, it's their newborn baby, and you're going to sell it and you're going to present it. And a lot of times you're going to do something they would have never thought of, that's the beautiful thing about cutting trailers. You come up with ideas that even, studio heads or filmmakers and musicians go, oh, wow, I never thought of this.
I think it's because you are both artists. You speak the same language, even though you have a different medium. I think for me, the best compliment I receive from filmmakers, like directors who I cut their trailer, was always, he understood my film. And I feel like when you have like people like Paul McCartney or whatever who are saying to you, oh, I love what you did here, it's like they feel seen because you understand their vision, you understand how they like to do things, and then you do your own thing as well, but you keep their essence, the essence of their film or of music.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do a small, short package of what is a 2-hour movie or a long album or, whatever documentary it is. To capture that is challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
What was your favorite trailer to work on? I'm sure it's going to be pretty tough because you did so many.
Well, I can tell you that it's actually one that's probably nobody knows about. It's a trailer called Snow Falling on Cedars. The producer was Kathleen Kennedy, who hired me to work for Spielberg and who I worked for on many of her movies. She was Spielberg's producer. And she came to me and she said, no, I have this kind of really beautiful movie that I would like to cut a trailer on. And it's a beautiful, it's set during the war where Japanese people were putting in camps and it's extremely slow and emotional. So it was a complete departure from what I at the time was doing. One of the things I really enjoy doing is slow, big, majestic trailers, which are, don't come very often now. You don't really have many of those. And it's one of my favorites. I mean, I have a million that I really love. I love JFK. I love Top Gun. I do, of course, because that was kind of like what broke, where my career broke. But yeah, it's like somebody asking you, who's your favorite child? It's like, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. To be honest, I really love as well trailers were very slow, emotional, using the music to the fullest. I remember this one is not made by you, but it's a really cool trailer as well. The one for Schindler's List was made by Mark Woolen. One piece of music and just pictures, and the emotion is there. You don't need sound effects. You don't need like 2 or 3 tracks of music. It's like simplicity and powerful.
Yeah.
And I think I also like yours on Forrest Gump. Like you really capture the essence of the movie, I think.
Well, that was a fun one. It was at a time where I had just left Kaleidoscope after 17 years and started in a new company that had been asked me to join them, and eventually I did. And that was the first movie I got in that new company. And I remember when I saw it, it was like unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was like so different. And again, piece of music, it was, I found that cue from Enter the Dragon, the Bruce Lee movie, for the whole back-end montage that had that emotion and that scope of it and just kind of brought everything together. And, amazing dialogue to work with. You listen and go, oh my God, this is such a great line. Great line to start with, great line to finish with, as we were talking about earlier, how you leave people.
Yeah, Eric Roth is like such an amazing screenwriter. I love his films. And on the other hand, what was the most challenging trailer you ever did in your life?
It's interesting because, and I've said this to some of the editors who I work with, is sometimes the most challenging and the most painful one becomes the best one. So I'm trying to remember what I really struggled with. I think it was An Officer and a Gentleman where I really struggled. It was not, sometimes I cut some trails in a day. Right? It was like butter. It just all came together. It was like, this is easy, right? And you almost kind of get a little too comfortable with yourself. I'm really good at this. I got this. And then you get a trailer where I always kind of said the trailer's like putting a puzzle together, and you're trying to fit the pieces where they're supposed to fit. And you don't know until, that's why I hate doing paper cuts, because you say, well, can you give me a paper cut? I have no idea what the trailer is going to be like until I sit down, I have my music, and I'm trying this piece of dialogue there. No, it doesn't work. Okay, how about this piece? No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work there. And now my story, there's no flow to my story. There's no flow to the emotions I'm trying to convey. So it's like getting pieces of a puzzle and try to put them where they fit. So I found myself, I think it's Officer and Gentleman, it was also because I was much younger and probably less experienced and less confident. struggling to see what fit where. But once the pieces fit, it was like it flowed. So the most challenging, I think, was probably one of the better trailers I cut.
Amazing. I remember also like a story you mentioned on LinkedIn about Michael Bay saying to you basically, "Oh, I know you can do way more than this."
So I worked with there's a client I worked with a lot at Columbia Pictures. He was a really good friend. And he said, I have a movie with this first-time filmmaker. The guy's done a lot of commercials, but this is his first movie. And same thing, Michael asked for reels, and Michael was very pompous, and he's a challenging person to work with, extremely talented, but challenging. And so he was convinced to have me cut a trailer, and we put a trailer together. I showed it to the client. The client said, "Yeah, it's really good. Let's show it to Michael." And we showed it to Michael, and Michael's like, "This is not what I want. Just not at all." And he said, "I've seen your reel. You can do much better than this. I've seen your other trailers. They're much better." So it's another guy who challenged me to do better. And the second pass was much better. So, sometimes you get upset at filmmakers or studio people and say, "No, I think you could do better." You can always do better.
Mm-hmm. But there's like a thin line between, doing what they want and also saying at some point, I don't really think that's the way to go, and try to persuade them to do the other way.
Well, that's the fine line with everybody, with every studio executive. Sometimes, I think it was on Australia, the Baz Luhrmann film, the head of the studio wanted me to use a piece of music from Henry V, a score from Henry V. And I kind of rolled my eyes. I thought, "Oh, why is he, And it was a great idea. So I think this is one of the things also I tell editors. A great editor is not somebody who can put a trailer together and do a great first cut. It's the person who can do a great second cut when he's given all the changes from the filmmaker in the studio, and a third cut, and a fifth cut, and try to keep the integrity of the piece that originally came up with artistically, but accommodate everybody's ideas. That's a great editor. And that's, by the way, the editor that everybody wants to work with.
That's so true. That's so true. And I also remember when I was working with Company 3 and learning about color, they told me, the big part of our job is color, obviously, but the second part, it's really important as well, is managing people. When you with the client in a room and working with them, you have to be good with people. And I kind of feel like speaking to you right now and learning about your career, you're really good with people as well. When you meet them, it's like you know how to handle the clients. No?
The thing is if you. I think I had not worked with Matt Reeves before we did the Batman, right? So I didn't know Matt Reeves. If you present yourself in a room and you're confident, you're comfortable, and you're social, and you're able to articulate what you're going to do, what your ideas are, they can sense your interest and your passion. They go, "Yeah, that's the right guy. I think you picked the right guy." I say about editors, there's three things that are crucial. A God-given talent, which we have nothing to do with it, that you're born with, right? That could be just like a great basketball player. There's like one among 100 that's talent that's given you from above that you're born with. Secondly is your work ethic and how dedicated you are to do your work, and that's really important. And number three is personality. If you're an unpleasant personality, people don't want to work with you. If you're difficult, you're argumentative, you're like, "Oh, another change." If you show enthusiasm and interest and passion, and go, "Okay, then I want to work with this guy." And that's the trifecta. I think those are the three essential things to be successful.
That's so true. And you're giving all this advice for young people who want to start in the industry. But at the same time, I have to mention this because I think it's important. I know someone who worked with, he was like really good at concept art in LA as an agency.
Yes.
He worked with like James Cameron on his films. Super talented, super successful, and super nice with people. he has the whole package. And now AI comes in, and he's really worried about the future of the industry when it comes to concept art. And I was wondering with you, like, I know they tried to do a trailer with IBM a few years ago for a sci-fi movie as like a marketing, campaign.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future with AI when it comes to editing?
Well, it's just artistically, just exactly like we talked about earlier. It's just people's individual talents are their assets. People will cut things in their own style. AI cannot copy that unless every one of us fed AI our style and you put all the pieces together. I still don't think a machine can copy individual talent. AI could not create what Picasso did. AI couldn't write what Sartre did. There's the individual human talent is not replicable. The sound of a voice, I think AI actually comes in really handy with a lot of the technical stuff, finishing stuff and prepping stuff. But as far as talent, artistic talent, I think it might, but I don't think in our generation.
Yeah. Because when you think about it, stories are about connecting people together through like a narrative. And if you say to AI to do a full feature by itself, I'm not sure if people are going to show up in the theaters to see maybe for the first time for the first movie, but
I'd be curious. But it's just I look at editors or musicians or it's an individual, it's incredible talent that and it makes them one of a kind. There's only one Paul McCartney, there's only one Prince, there's only one Spielberg. There's a million directors, and there's a handful of incredible directors, Scorsese and Spielberg and Ridley Scott, etc., and French. AI cannot replicate that. It can replicate a lot of the logistics. So I think we're safe for quite some time.
cool. Yeah, you still think that AI is just a tool and humans will always be behind the tool and not used by the tool.
Yeah.
So I have one thing I want to talk to you about. It's a bit different from trailers, but I think it's going to be interesting as well. This podcast, I called it Storytellers and Explorers because I think it's really important when you're telling stories to be curious. Try different mediums, learn about different mediums. Mm-hmm. And I've seen online that you are writing children's book. And I think that's really interesting. Can you speak a bit about that? How did you come from, cutting trailers and now writing?
Well, many years ago, when our kids were younger, kids were little, there were DVDs that they watched for a company called Baby Einstein, and it was basically entertainment for very young children. And my wife came to me and said, we should do this, but we should do a modern version of it that's available online and on an app, so people can, traveling with their kids, with their phones and their tablets, they can watch the videos. And so we started proceeding to put the company together, and we started creating children's entertainment. And we had like 6 videos that we shot ourselves on the trip to Europe of boats and birds, and it was but slowly but surely we built the content from videos to animated videos with games and interactive stuff. And then my wife came to me and said, do you remember when we were kids, we used to listen to books on cassettes? And I said, oh yeah. And you press the cassette, you either listened to it or looked at the book while it was read. And anybody who has children will relate to this. You finish the story and the kid says, again, and you go, oh God, Well, with this, you just press play again and the story will be told again. So I said, yeah, that's a great idea. We reached out to some children's book authors, and either they didn't understand the concept, like, you want to do what, a video of my book? I don't know. Or the publishers didn't give them the rights to do a video version of it. It was only a hard copy. So I said, you know what? I think I'll just write one and see how it goes. So I wrote one, and on top of it, I wrote it in rhyme, which was really difficult. But I found out later from a neuroscientist who had a kid who was looking at our stuff that writing in rhyme is actually good for young children's brain development. And again, it's also rhythmic. Da 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 da. So again, we're back to the original question that you asked about rhythm. This rhythm is everywhere, right? So I wrote one. I had a friend of mine who was a mom of two read it. I found a composer to score it, and we put it on. And that was kind of for us, it was like kind of an example of what we could show other authors what it would look like. And I still didn't get a response, so I wrote a second one, and I wrote another one. And what happened in the process of writing, I discovered another interest that I had that I wasn't really aware of. That I thought, okay, I love music and I love editing, and all of a sudden I find myself realizing I love writing. And I was able, now I finished my 30th book, so I've been, I keep writing them. I found an incredible satisfaction in putting words together, telling stories, putting words together, looking at a blank piece of paper. There's nothing more challenging. We cut trailers, we're working with other people's material. When you write, you have a pen and a white piece of paper, and you go, okay, and what do I come up with, and how does it rhyme? And for me, it's even complicated because I have to figure what rhymes with what. And I found a great pleasure in writing. So that's how it all came together. It's the same thing, it's just kind of embracing the journey as it comes to you. I tell a lot of my friends who want to do something, I say, try it. You don't want to look back and say, I should have tried it, and I think a lot of us have talent in ourselves that we're not aware until we tap into it. Writing is becoming another passion of mine. And then, as I said, I love cutting the trailers, and it's great, and it's really incredible feeling. Seeing the response from parents and children of the stuff that I write is incredibly rewarding. It's a completely different experience. I'm going from commercial to emotional, and a kind of grand to small. And I'm now in the process. I've written about a few children, one who's autistic, one who has Down syndrome, and the stories were really incredible. So it's just expansion of the journey.
Wow. You must be the coolest dad ever to be able to work with the biggest filmmakers in the world and then telling bedtime stories to your kids.
The funny thing is that actually I used my kids' voices in all the stuff for our children's company. So they're in everything. So they participated in it was kind of it's a family adventure.
That's amazing. And you know what? I knew you were a family guy because I read a story on LinkedIn that you wrote about your daughter, and you were doing the Jurassic Park trailer for Spielberg, and you said, I can't this weekend work on it. I have to be to my, daughter's birthday, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an interesting thing that a lot of people compromise for their careers. I had, from the very beginning, kind of that was my code, that family comes first. That no matter whatever the opportunity is, you're going to have another trailer on your reel, or you're going to miss your daughter's birthday party, right? I remember when my kids were growing up, there was a client who wanted he wanted a Monday morning meeting at the studio, and I would say, no, I'm dropping my kids off at school. I remember going to Christmas concerts and seeing the kids come on stage, and the first thing they do is look for their parents. Parenting is a whole different journey. And I've lost a lot of jobs for not being available because it was an event for my family, but I don't care. Family is more important.
That's really refreshing because I know cinema is such a challenging industry to be in. You have to make a lot of sacrifices and work really hard. And for me as well, like I'm a freelancer, you never know when the next project is going to come. For me, I'm fortunate enough to be able to have lots of projects to work on, but I know it's not the same for everybody. For me, I want to be one day a dad as well. What's your tip for me when I have kids? Because I've spent all my free time what I can on trailers because I love it. I love to write like you. I love to tell stories. How do you balance things? Like just make priority number one, family, even though the biggest project is coming in.
Family comes first, no matter what. That said, if there's an incredible opportunity, you can kind of figure out. When I said to my boss at Kaleidoscope I couldn't do it, Spielberg said, "Oh, you can do it on Monday." The clients and filmmakers are also human. And you say, I want to work at this is incredible opportunity, but I have to do this with my family. They'll let you do it. They understand. People, unless there's or if it's a person who doesn't understand, you don't want to work for them. But I mean, family has always come first for me.
That's great. To be honest, I've been in this situation before. Like I remember a few years ago, I was working with Sonia on a project, and I was supposed to go to Paris for a weekend to see like a friend for her birthday. And the two of the biggest French directors were doing a trailer with Sonia. I was working on it, and they said before going to skiing in the Alps, "Oh, we want to see the trailer 1 week earlier before going to the vacations." And I had to cancel my plans to work on it. And I don't care because I love working with Sonia, and it was a great project. But sometimes it's really difficult to balance things out.
I mean, it can happen once in a while. I mean, it's like, I can't say you never, ever, always say no. It's just a balance, and it's just a balance that people, things have changed dramatically now since the pandemic because we all, at Rebel, we all work from home. So makes things a lot easier. When you're working from home, you can go, I spend a lot of time with my family. My kids are off to college, but when they're here, we're all together. And I have a lot of time with my wife. We can do things together. It's incredible. Now you can look at a cut on the phone. So it's like the things have changed dramatically from just having to be in the office every day.
And I think it's great to have like a common project with your wife, this children's book, to be able to work with your wife on this.
She actually does the whole children's company with me. So she's like my toughest client. When I show her video, she goes, I don't like the color. It's like, okay, I got to change the color. And she's great at it. She knows, she's a mom, so she knows what works and what doesn't work. But it's a whole interesting side business. The app is over in 100 countries in the world now. So we're it's and I do both. I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning doing the baby stuff, and then I start business about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Amazing. And your children want to be storytellers as well? They want to tell stories like their parents?
No, my youngest son, who is in college, who is starting his second year in college, he might be. He's definitely interested in advertising and kind of, storytelling. My daughter, who is 22, is actually in business, and she she just moved to Dallas. She just graduated college, and she's all business. It's all, it's pretty funny. And my oldest son, who's 24, works for my company. He's an assistant. So yeah, he'll probably go into that.
That's amazing. And you never know, because I was in the business school before moving to trailers. Like advertising and movie marketing is really close. Yeah. That's why I liked it. And I have one last question for you. I want to ask the same question for every guest on this podcast. Could you tell us a personal story, like a life event, someone you met, that truly changed your life or made you learn something important?
Okay. So I was working at Kaleidoscope, 1980. The company was a union, so you had a qualification in the editors' union. You were either apprentice, assistant, or editor. At the time, I was an apprentice, and I was making $360 a week. And I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, I've been cutting. I start to cut. I just want to be moved up to assistant editor at $550 a week." He said, "No, you're not quite ready yet." In the meantime, there was a guy who I knew from a common friend who was a cinematographer, and he was shooting second unit cinematography on a movie. And he said, hey, I'm shooting this stuff. I'm shooting second unit, and the producer has just been awarded from the studio to be able to shoot a documentary on the making of the movie. And they're shooting on 35. And he knew that the company where I work at Kaleidoscope did a lot of documentaries on the making of. So he said, you know, I'm a cinematographer. What do I do? I'm not sure. What do I do? So I said, well, you shoot them shooting the scene, then you interview the director, you shoot the actors, the producer, you have them talk about it. And so you have a bit of material to work with. And he said, okay, great. Would you be willing to help me and sync up the dailies on the weekends? So this was 35 picture and mag dailies, right? And I said, yeah, of course. And I remember I was dating a girl who was a flight attendant at the time. Why are you doing this on the weekend? They're barely paying you. It's a waste of your time. So I was doing a friend a favor, right? The movie that I was helping him work on was called A Boy's Life. And then he said to me, well, you know, you want to come on the set, you know, you can kind of look at what we're doing. And I went on the set, and there was Spielberg directing. And the movie A Boy's Life was actually E.T. And I went a few times on the set, I went on location, but I never met Steven. I always kind of stayed in the back and said, you know, shoot this, do that. And the movie finished. As you know, on many movies, when they finish a movie, they do a wrap party where they put the cast and crew together and they have a big party somewhere. And by then, we had a lot of documentary footage and a lot of fun stuff. Like on Halloween, Steven came up dressed as a woman. And we said, oh, we put together a gag reel that we'll show at the party. So we put together a little gag reel. And Steven goes, thanks, everybody. It was great, blah, blah. I think we have a little thing to look at. We rented a projector. And let's look at it. He looks at the reel, and he freaks out. This is fantastic. Who did this? This is great. And my friend John says, this is Benedict, who's been syncing up the dailies for whoever's going to cut the documentary. And we put the little reel together. And he said, you're coming to work with us on Monday. And I said, well, I work, blah, blah. And he said, don't worry, we'll call the company. And to make a long story short, I literally went from my little editing room at Kaleidoscope to Steven's apartment the week after. The moral of my story is that I did something for a friend as a favor, right? So without expecting anything in return. It was just, he asked me to help him and I helped him. That was the most transformative time in my entire career. I went from a small-time editor to working for Spielberg, and then my career completely changed. So my moral of the story is, if somebody asks for help, always be there, always be willing. Never be too good to say, no, I'm too busy, I don't have time, right?
That's an amazing story. I love it.
It changed my career. As a result of being giving and open to helping a friend.
Well, you made your girlfriend unhappy, but it was for a good thing. It was like for... Yeah. Wow, Benedict, that's so inspiring. Again, thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy, but I love talking to you. That's very inspiring for me. We wanted to work in trailers and cutting since I was 15. You're one of our biggest inspiration in this industry, with Sonia as well. Thanks again. Yeah.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Please give her my best. I got to reach out to her. I haven't talked to her in a while. She's the best.
Yeah, we're working on the trailer right now, so I'm going to send her an email after this.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Benedict.
My pleasure.